Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod, except this week we are without the $1 million man himself, Ted DiBiase. You know, coming off of WrestleCon, Ted is keeping the train rolling out there meeting fans, except this time he's going across the pond to spend some time with his fans in the UK. So that being the case, we are going to dig back into the archives and provide you guys with the best of Ask Ted Anything with some early Ask Ted Anything episodes here from the show. You know, Ted always loves doing those. He always lights up getting to hear some of these interesting, unique questions from fans that he doesn't really have the opportunity to answer very often. And so we're going to look back and give you guys some of the highlights of those. We'll be back next week talking about WCW in 1997. But in the meantime, sit back, relax, and enjoy some of the best of Ted answering your questions. So, Ted, the fans have got some questions. You ready to answer?
I hope so.
We'll get through them here.
So. I mean, I'm going on 70 years old, and they say that just naturally your memory starts to slide a little bit, but usually I can remember things that I did way back. I can remember some of that stuff better than I can remember what I did yesterday.
Man, the short-term memory for me is always where I struggle as well. But yeah, no, I'm with you. It's all right. We'll get through it. I know some of this stuff, so worst case scenario, I'll try to give a little more context, and we'll see if we can work things out. So the first question is from Jason Bayless. Is it true that Vince wanted Ted to make a return as an in-ring performer in 2005 as the $1 million man? This would have been around the time that he asked Arn, Steamboat, Mike, which is IRS, Fit Finley, and more. And if so, what were the plans for the character if you had said yes? Ted, do you remember that?
I don't remember Vince ever asking me to come back as an in-ring talent. I mean, what was it? What year did he say that was?
He said it was 2005 that he would have asked you. So you would have been working backstage in creative.
Yeah, I mean, and no, I don't think there was. I had gotten physically out of the business, right at about the 20-year mark, and for people who, some people that I know that know me know this, but for the people that don't know this, I chose that. I actually told my wife, I said, I am not going to stay in the ring actively too long. I'm not going to end up like my dad. And so right as I was just about to turn 40 when I got out of the ring. And I knew that I physically was capable. Physically, I still had it in me to continue, but I chose to, for that reason, get out of the ring.
So despite your neck injury, you in theory could have continued working.
Yes, yeah, I could have. But,
wow.
I just because that, and again that added to my decision. Obviously, this thing happened. I said, you know what, I'm about to be 40 years old. I'm done. So.
Well, let me ask you this: you took a bump not all that long ago with NXT. So I mean, with that being the case, was there any concern whenever you took that bump? Like, man, I could screw up my neck.
No. The thing about, and again, it was one bump.
Right.
The reason that my neck got to be the way it was, and there's been other wrestlers too that have had the same thing. Same neck surgery, disc issues with the cervical. The lower discs, where your spinal cord meets your whatever head, your neck. There have been other guys that have had a similar surgery that I did, but no, I just said no. I said, okay, this has happened. This should be a sign to me that it's time for me to get out of the ring, and I did. But yeah, no, I was never approached by Vince to get back in the ring.
Here's the other thing that maybe fans aren't considering, and I don't know. I'll ask you: were you had you cashed in a Lloyds of London policy whenever you got injured?
Well, yeah, that was basically one of the things that enabled me to go ahead and do that at that time.
Right.
And what was funny about that was, it's kind of like, and I'm trying to think who told me about Lloyds of London, and I was like, wow, really? And because I had no idea, and I was like, I was almost shocked that Lloyds of London, because I mean, for to be a wrestler and to be a wrestler at my age, and then they try to take out an insurance policy like that, you almost wonder if they're gonna give it to you, but because of what you do. It's kind of like, would you give an insurance policy to a NASCAR driver? Or,
Right.
It's kind of like. But anyway, I did have a Lloyds of London policy, and because I did, it enabled me. In other words, if I didn't have that policy, I, even though I was making a good living, I wasn't really the $1 million man, and I wouldn't have been able to afford to quit.
Right. You would have had to keep going without that policy.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, even if you had been asked to come out of retirement in 2005, you couldn't. You'd cashed in that Lloyds of London policy. So you'd have to either pay that money, you'd have to pay that money back in order to continue working.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
exactly.
Interesting question, though. Next up, we've got Patriot Dan on Twitter, who asks, how did the partnership with Sherry Martell occur, and what was she like to work with?
Looking back, I can't remember whose idea it was to put Sherry with me, but it turned out great. I mean, Sherry was wonderful. I mean, Sherry. She was like, it was like being with Sherry was like being with one of the guys.
Right.
I mean that's the best way I can describe it. I mean, and plus Sherry legitimately, because if you know about her background and the things that she went through in life to get to where she was,
man,
it was incredible.
Hard road,
hard life, and but to be as sweet as she was, it was, and it was kind of like with Sherry, I didn't have to encourage her, is what I'm saying. I didn't have to encourage her to do more. Actually, I had to kind of pull her back and say, don't do so much, because it kind of like wait for the right moments. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. I've heard Jake say the same thing about working with Sherry, where he's like, man, she will steal the spotlight every single time if you let her.
Yeah. So, but she was great. Thought the world of her.
We'll talk in depth about Sherry sometime down the road. Ben Jones from Ad Free Shows asks, with regards to the basketball kicking incident, was the kid's family in on that, and did they receive anything after the show?
Of all the things and all the gimmicks that I have done over the years, the one that everybody remembers is the little boy and the basketball.
Yep.
And so here's the story. We were in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee. I remember asking the question. I said, "Well, what's Milwaukee famous for?" And somebody said, "Beer and basketball." And so I said, "Well, we can't do anything with beer. Let's do something with the basketball." And so I actually think it was Gorilla Monsoon's idea. Excuse me. And he said, "Let's get a basketball, and you dribble the basketball, and you tell a little boy, okay, let me see you dribble the basketball 10 times." And he does it. Yeah, and you could tell when he did it that he was doing it, but I was scared to death that at any moment he was going to miss. And I said, "Okay, if you could do that again 15 times without missing, I'll give you $500."
Mm-hmm.
Of course, being the $1 million man, and son, I could tell you and your family need the money. You know, what a jerk, right?
Right.
And so he's, you know, he starts with it, and he gets to 14, and I didn't really kick the ball. I just put my foot under where the ball was going to bounce, and made it bounce off of my foot. And I said, that's tough luck, kid. When you don't get the job done, you don't get the money, or you don't get paid. Now we rehearsed it, and in rehearsal, I was just being me. But when we do it live, I got to be the $1 million man. I got to be hardcore.
Right.
When I said, when you don't get the job done, you don't get paid. Oh, it scared him. He had crocodile tears. I mean, oh my gosh, he started crying.
Yeah.
He ran to his mother. I mean, he couldn't have done it any better. I mean, man, I remember getting backstage and everybody was going, that was so good. Oh my gosh, that was great. And I said, I'm glad you're all happy. Now find an armored vehicle to get me out of the building. I mean, those people want to kill me. So fast forward 20 years. I was in Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I'm originally from. That was my home, or that's where the DiBiase's started, and my dad had a household. You know, like when you're a wrestler's kid, you move around a lot. You lived in a lot of apartments.
Right.
That was legitimately home, and so I had gone there to, it wasn't wrestling related. I think I had some kind of a speaking engagement. My ministry, that was what it was. And I had a speaking engagement related to my ministry, and I was renting a car. And so this guy taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around, and I'm gosh, like looking at his chest. Well, I'm 6'4". Well, I'm like 6'2" now, you get old, you shrink. But anyway, and I'm looking at this guy's chest. I look up, oh my gosh. And he said, hey, Mr. DiBiase, he says, I'm the manager here. Can I help you find a car? I said, yeah, man. I find something that would fit both of us. And he said, I'd be happy to. And then he waited a couple seconds, and then he said, by the way, he says, do you remember that thing you did with the kid in the basketball? And it was just the expression on his face. And I looked at him and I went, no. And he said, it's nice to see you again. It was him.
No way.
It was him. What are the odds of that happening? And and I said, are you serious? Is it really you? And he said, yes, it's really me. And I said, well, obviously you look like you're doing good for yourself. And he says, you're going to love this, Mr. DiBiase. He says, I actually went to college on a basketball scholarship.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Right. And it was incredible. So
what are the odds? That is just amazing.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Did you get a photo with him or anything like that?
I did. And the other thing was I got his information, and I don't know how I lost it. I'm bad at losing things, especially when I'm out on the road. But I would have loved, and even now, if I could get if the WWE could get a hold of that guy, I mean, I know if I could have done something with him, like do this, like, yeah, hey fans, do you remember this? Well, now let me introduce you to this guy who used to be about this tall. Now he's like a foot taller than me.
I'm already picturing you doing it to another kid and he intervenes or something like that. It would be tremendous.
But that was it was unbelievable. He went to college on a basketball scholarship.
Well, let me put it out there. If he's listening to this right now, please reach out online at Ted DiBiase Pod. We'd love to have you come on the show. It would be incredible.
It would.
Man, so that night though, did you go and talk to the kid afterwards, or were you just out of the building?
Oh no, we went and thanked him. I mean, like almost immediately after, and of course, and obviously the kid did get the money.
Yes.
It's like, because I did a lot of things with different people, trying to prove that everybody had a price. I think one week I picked a girl out of the crowd, and I got her in the ring and made her get on her hands and knees and bark like a dog.
You made Rob Van Dam kiss your foot.
Oh yeah, exactly. Rob Van Dam kissed my foot. I said, "Look what I did for him."
Skyrocket. I mean,
He kisses my foot. He loves wrestling, and eventually he becomes a big star.
Hall of Famer now. A
Yeah.
coincidence? I
Oh
think
yeah.
not.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
Ted,
and what was funny is when after, and I didn't see, I heard that he got in the business, and saw that he was doing well, but I can't remember where it was the first time we actually came face to face again. And I looked at him and smiled, and I said, "Hey, I got another foot over here you can kiss." And he says, "Okay," he says, "but it's a lot more expensive now."
man, shout out to Rob. He and actually my brother Dominic have a podcast on Premier Streaming Network, just like we do. So
Yeah,
shout out to Rob. Maybe we can get him to come on for
that
some
would
kind
be
of a
great.
bonus
That
thing at
would be
some point.
great. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, look, here's a question. It's just for me. It's kind of related, but you with stuff like what you're doing here with this kid, and I mean all of your antics, kicking all the kids out of the pool, you were getting an awful lot of heat. And now I know that you and I talked about you having flash cash that you would kind of prove to people that you were, in fact, the $1 million man. But I'm wondering, with all the heat that you were getting, did you ever have to defend yourself against any angry fans?
I didn't. It never got that. It never got to that point. Um, I can. I don't know. I can remember one time after a show, and I can't even remember where it was. And we would, especially if you were staying over, and you go back to the hotel, and the hotel has a lounge, and go have a couple of beers and talk to the guys and get something to eat, and I think somebody smarted off about something, or I think it was more about you guys are all a bunch of phonies, and if you wanna make me mad, that's all you need to say. And I grabbed this guy by his shirt, and I lifted him off the ground, and had him against the wall, with his feet like a foot off the ground, and I said, "Does this feel fake? And do you want to feel any more?" And he shook his head, no, and I let him go. So anyway, but other than that, no, not really. I mean, like most of the fans, and they knew that it was, I mean, basically Vince announced to the world that we were sports entertainment, so they knew it wasn't real.
Right.
So
Well,
that was cool.
I mean, and for context for our listeners, I mean, those were the days when, like, you had just come from Bill Watts's territory where there was
Yeah,
like an edict that was put out that, like, hey, if you get into a bar fight and you lose, you're out, you're fired.
yeah,
So like, you would just come from that territory. So it's like that's a defend yourself, defend the business type territory. So totally
yeah,
understandable that you kind of jack this guy up. And by the
yeah,
way, Jim Duggan has told me some wild stories about getting into bar brawls alongside like Dr. Death and Hercules Hernandez, and man, just
yeah.
it was the Wild West back in the day, was it not?
It was. Oh, it was. And I was with Jim on one of those occasions, and it was actually here. I live in the Jackson, Mississippi area, and I think it was in Jackson somewhere, and I can't remember, but he said that I get in a fight with this guy, and of course, Jim wears big thick glasses because he got that issue with his eyes, and I think his glasses were worn up, and he says, like he couldn't find the guy. The guy, he said the guy bit my finger, and the way Jim did it was he was kind of like he went like, "Oh, there you are. Now I know where you are," and punched him, and then two punches, and the guy was down. So.
Man, Jim Duggan, nothing to
Oh,
mess with,
no,
even to this
yeah,
day.
yeah, yeah. You gotta really be out of your mind to want to mess with somebody like Duggan.
My
And
God.
then Jim was a legit man. I mean, he played college football. I think he played a little pro for a while, like maybe a
Yep.
year or two, and then he came to wrestling. But he was always a legit. Thank goodness Jim Duggan is a nice guy.
That's what I was gonna say too.
Yeah,
Is
because if of course like guys his size and that strong that aren't nice guys. A lot of them either end up in jail or dead.
Yeah, or like will bully people, and that's what I was gonna say is like, that's the other part of this is if you're pissing off Jim Duggan to the point where he's gonna fight you, you're doing something wrong because he is the nicest
Yeah,
person around.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, next up we've got Francis Reyes. What did you think of your Hasbro figure at the time? Ted, I've included a slide of this figure. I think this would have been like your second action figure with the WWF, with LJN being your first. Not necessarily this figure, but I'll ask you, what did you think of having, like, when you first saw an action figure of yourself? Like, what went through your head?
Oh my gosh. I mean, because, they never tell us those things, no, they never announced to us that, oh yeah, by the way, we're gonna make action figures of you guys. Uh, I mean, the first time I saw one, I think I can't remember. I was either in a sporting goods store or I don't know, Walmart or something, and I'm walking through and I went and I spotted that first one, though, the LJN,
Yeah, the big
you know,
rubber guy.
big rubber thing,
Yeah.
and I was like, no way. I was like, and so, but since then, I mean, it's kind of like, um, you would think that the action figures, because we get, we get royalties off of all that stuff that's made in our likeness. But our cut is like really poor,
Yeah.
really poor. But anyway, uh, you know, what's funny is I make more money off of electronics, video games. I make more money as a royalty on video games than I do the action figures.
Really?
And those what are those little ones with they got the little buddy and the big head on them.
Yes.
Yeah, the Funko Pops.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many of those I have signed. And I tell everybody, yeah, that actually looks more like me. Slimmer body and this great big head.
Man, it's like you might not be making the money off of, like, the percentages or whatever, but pretty nice to fill up your gimmick table at these events with some of these action figures to sign, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Man, it's cool to see them still producing action figures of you. I know that there's one, I think, set to come out here pretty soon to like Target or something. But yeah, just it's got to be a weird feeling. What did your wife think the first time she saw an action figure of you or you on a magazine or something?
Well, she just shook her head. I can't believe it. And then she looked at me and she says, "Don't let it go to your head."
That's why we need women in our lives to keep
That's
us
right.
grounded.
Keep us straight.
Francis has another question following this one up. Do you have any wrestling items that you still own from your career? Any of your like gear you still own?
I have a few things, but just I'm going to just throw it out there right now. What I have left is not for sale, and that comes directly from my wife's. Yeah, that's what she said. She goes, like, because there's some things that I had given to charities to make money. They would raffle it off, or the highest bid gets it type of thing, uh, in an effort to help charities raise money for special causes. But now that it's down to, I think I've got one full suit left.
Wow.
And a couple of pair of wrestling tights, the tights with the dollar signs on the side, and I don't know. I might have one pair of boots left too. So,
Man, I want to save that stuff for your grandchildren.
That's
You
it.
know?
That's it.
It's something they'll really appreciate. What about the loaded black glove, Ted? You still have one of those around?
Actually I don't, but I mean, what I would do when I first started doing that, I was working for Bill, and that's when I turned heel. And no, I couldn't go out at that time and find a black glove like that. The gloves that I got they were the kind of gloves that weightlifters would use.
Right.
And so they were all like, I can't remember what color they were, but I had to get like black, the liquid shoe polish, and I would paint them black so they'd be black. But I no, I don't. Actually, uh, uh, somebody found one of those. I don't know where they found it. It must have been one I discarded. But and I mean, I can't even remember the story now of where he found it. But somebody actually, I was doing an autograph signing at a Comic-Con or something, and he brought one of those gloves up for me to sign. I went, "Where did you get this?" Oh gosh, man.
Say, man, you might have to pick a couple of those up to put on your tables at these signings. I think they'd be a
Yeah.
big hit.
Hey, you know what? Good idea.
Could be a big hit.
Yeah.
Frank is up next. If not you, who do you think could have been the $1 Million Man? I've always heard Ric Flair has been thrown out there.
Yeah. I mean, Flair would have, it's like, Vince, like at the beginning when we started the thing with me, he said, he gave me this flash cash. He called it the flash cash. I always had $2,000 in brand new $100 bills in my pocket. Flair would have done it over the top. I did it, but with me, Vince didn't have to go, whoa. With Rick, he'd have to go, whoa. I don't know.
100%.
No, but legitimately, yeah. Rick is, that was his style anyway.
Right. Buying everybody at the bar drinks.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I've also heard Gino Hernandez thrown out there. What would you think of him in that position had he not passed away, of course?
Yeah, he'd have been good. Yeah, those are two good choices.
I don't think you can beat the original, man. You were the right dude at the right time. Johnny Gringo is up next. What is your personal opinion of Bad News Brown?
Bad News Brown. I didn't know him well, but I got along with him. And I think that he was good. He was a good wrestler, good performer. I just, I never, it's kind of like I didn't spend a lot of time with him. I mean, we saw each other on the road. We saw each other in the locker room occasionally, in a restaurant or at the bar in the hotel. But I didn't know him enough to, I didn't have enough of a relationship with him, but to say either, personally, I thought he was a very nice guy. And work wise, his work in the ring, I thought was great. I had, nothing bad to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, by and large, I've heard nothing but good things about the guy. Personally, I know that Jake was a big fan of his, and he actually wound up leaving right after his rivalry with Jake. Or it was like a match at SummerSlam, and then he was just gone afterwards. Because I think that he was one of those guys who Vince had said, like, "Hey, I could picture you as my world champion," and then it didn't happen. And he was like, "Well, he promised me the world championship, and I didn't get it."
Yeah.
So man, it's he's one of those what ifs, what could have beens, because man, big guy, a lot of talent, fun to watch, good promo. Would have loved to have seen where he'd have gone. KJ Jado on Twitter asks, any funny Virgil road story or two?
Oh gosh. I think one time, we went to the hotel, and so I went in and everything. So he goes and he parks the car, but then later I just wanted to go. I wanted to go somewhere and get something, and so I took the car. By myself. We're already in the hotel. And he's going to go to bed, and I was going to, and so I went when I came back. And I parked the car in a different location.
Oh no.
And I went back and, and I gave him the keys. And so the next day he called me in a panic. He goes, the car's gone. The car's gone. Somebody stole our car. I said, what? So now, I mean, initially I got all like, well, how the heck did that happen? And then I remembered. I said, sorry, pal. I didn't mean to get you all beat up, but it's right over there. Because he went to get the car where it had been parked.
The previous spot.
Yeah.
Man,
But,
I can't. We're gonna do a full-blown episode on Virgil one of these days and talk about your full history with him. So I can't wait to do that. And next up, we've got Peter D. Did anyone try to legitimately hurt you in the ring? Ted, anybody ever take any liberties with you in the ring?
No.
Never.
No. And I don't know if that's because they were smart enough to know not to.
Right.
Or if it was just out of respect for my, my ring ability. But no, I didn't know. Nobody ever, in terms of like trying to rough me up or, no, I never had any trouble with anybody. The only, I mean, like I say, trouble for me in the ring would be with somebody who didn't get it, who was like, no matter what I told them to do, they didn't do it right.
Now, under those circumstances, Ted, if you're in the ring with, I'm just going to throw out a name that I assume you might be talking about, somebody like Ultimate Warrior, who had a history of being difficult to work with in the ring and kind of wanting to do his own thing. Are you throwing a stiff shot in there to try to like calm him down or set the tone, or how does that go?
Well, yeah. I mean, and even him, and I, my gosh, the time that I worked with him was like, it was such a short match, and I wasn't happy about it. I wasn't happy about it at all because number one, I didn't respect him at all. I didn't respect him at all because he had no respect for us. He had no respect for the wrestling business. For him, it was all a means to an end. And all the boys understood that. All the boys could see that. And I can't understand Vince, I don't know, maybe Vince's ego is, I'm going to take this giant muscle head and watch me make a star out of him. Because Vince thought he could make anybody, and to a degree he did. But I mean, that's just it. Unless the Warrior was in the ring with somebody who could lead him, he couldn't do anything.
Right.
And if you ever watch his matches, you can name the things he did in every match. He'd get in the ring and back and forth and shake the ropes and do his, puff and beat his chest, and that's it. Game over.
Right. And he was blown up before the match started because he'd come running down to the ring.
Yeah.
Yeah. And man, interesting kind of looking back, as a kid, I would see the Ultimate Warrior on TV and be like, oh, jacked up guy, face paint, crazy hair. Like, I like him, and that was kind of all it took. But then, as you start to get older and hear all the stories and just kind of see that, as you said, he's doing all the same stuff. It's lariats. It's like the big press. That's probably really dangerous to take. And there was nothing under the hood.
Yeah. He just, and that's it. The other thing is, growing up in the business like I did, first thing is your first obligation is to take care of the other guy's body.
Yes.
In other words, if any, and because things happen where you slip or whatever, but in any way that you can, if something happens, you try to protect the other guy. And if both guys have that attitude, then everything's going to be okay. But when one guy doesn't care, and he didn't, he didn't care who he hurt. It was just, means to an end. And it was really sad. I just, the other, I don't know, I guess, and I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for Vince, but, the only thing I could think is, Vince is one of those guys is like, well, you don't like him, watch what I could make of him. And he did make him a big star, but his star power didn't last long because he couldn't do anything. He could do 4 or 5 things, and after everybody saw that same match over and over and over, you get tired of it. Let's go on to something new.
Absolutely. And then, not to mention, it's like, man, he was really starting to ascend, and then he starts issuing ultimatums to Vince, the boss, other talent. And it's like,
Oh yeah,
oh gosh,
hit the road, Jack.
yeah, ridiculous. Jake tells a story about how he had, before he was able to start a program with Warrior, he actually had to come to Warrior at Vince's request and ask permission to work with him. Insanity, letting the inmates run the asylum.
Yeah, Vince. I mean, I know Vince. Jake never told me that, but I'm sorry, but I mean, I got along with Marcus. I got along with everybody. And there's guys you really like, and there's guys and if you don't really like them too much, you just stay away from them. But I pretty much got along with everybody. And anytime that question comes up, is there any one guy that you just had no, and that's it? It's the Ultimate Warrior. To make somebody, go ask the guy if you can work with him. Are you serious? No.
Ridiculous.
That's going way too far.
Ridiculous. Man.
And I, you know what? And I would say that to Vince today.
You've got a guy like Jake who's a veteran talent. He established himself, proved himself over years, the territories, everything. And man, you'll have to ask Jake next time you see him around about that story, because Warrior's reaction whenever Jake comes and asks permission to work with him, man, it is unbelievable. We covered on my other podcast, The Snake Pit. So if you guys want to hear it,
Wow.
go ahead and go listen to that. But man, Warrior's reaction and the way that he treated Jake when Jake asked permission, just awful. So we'll move on. We don't have to bury Warrior anymore. Next up, we've got Barbecue.
But I mean, not Warrior, but Jake. One of the guys that I absolutely love working with is Jake. I mean, Jake was in my book, one of the top 10 ever.
Yep.
Ever. I don't know where I rank with him, but I mean, we've been friends a long time. And I mean, it was like working with Jake for me was like a night off. Like, this is going to be easy because we're just going to go out there and we're going to do the dance, because we both basically came from the same school of wrestling psychology and what wrestling was and how anyway.
I've heard him say the same thing about you. Working with you was like a night off. Always loved your work. And yeah, like a lot of people like to point to Jake and say like, oh, well, he's the greatest promo of all time. And it's like, yeah, he was a great promo. However, if you look at his ring work, just like the crispness of everything that he did when he was in his prime, man, the guy could go.
Yeah. Yeah. He could go.
All right. Next up, Ted, we've got Barbecue Dad 105. Does Ted have any fun battle royal stories?
Just that the biggest battle royal I think I was ever in. It's like, I remember, I thought I was thinking battle royal. Like what's the big battle royal?
Royal Rumble.
The Royal Rumble. Okay, and I'm thinking, oh, it's the Royal Rumble. This is going to be a night off, And so, but I remember the day of the show. Pat Patterson came by and we were eating. Like they cater food for us, and Pat came by and he says, Ted, he says, if I were you, I wouldn't eat too much. I said, what? He said, you're going to be in there a while tonight. Be in there a while. I was the first guy in and almost the last guy out.
Oh my goodness.
And I can't remember which one it was. It was like, oh my gosh. I was like, because at the time, the way they did it, they didn't start with all the guys in the ring. They'd start with, and then every minute or whatever it was, you'd hear a buzzer and somebody else would run to the ring. I was the first guy, in the ring. And then they kept adding them and adding them and adding them. But it was like almost, I don't know. I mean, you talk about wearing my butt out.
Man, that is a tall order for
I
anybody.
can't remember.
Was it 89? I want to say it was 89 or something.
I can't remember. But yeah, I was in there a long time.
Oh God, brutal. And I know that Flair had to do the same thing back when he won the Royal Rumble. He was in there forever, and it's like, man, you better have your wind right if you're gonna do something like that. Because holy smokes.
And of course, the guys help you too, because you get in there and there's, after a while, there's so many guys in the ring. The fans can only watch, collectively. But there were guys, a lot of the guys that helped me in terms of, like even they knew, okay, they grabbed me and said, okay, Ted, let's go over here in this corner and let you rest for a minute.
I've heard a lot of people say that the strategy when you're in a battle royal or a Royal Rumble is like just find a corner and rest as long as you can. That way you're not going to catch an elbow or a knee from anybody too, and then you can kind of get back out and get into the action a little bit. So
yeah, and the other thing is you got to be careful what you do, because there's so many bodies in the ring. You got to be careful. I mean, like it'd be real hard to pick a guy up and just body slam him, because you got, once there's like 20 people in that ring, how do you do that?
Yeah, you're stuck just kind of brawling with that many people.
Right. Yeah. So, but it would always get down to the last like 4 or 5 guys, and then they would have a strategy as to what they would do and how they would do it, which made it exciting.
And to this day, one of the fans' favorite events, the Royal Rumble, every year. So it speaks to the quality of the idea from Pat Patterson.
Yeah.
Next up, we've got Michael McClanahan. What were some of the challenges associated with pulling off the $1 Million Man gimmick? How do you believe the character would translate in modern audience? So that's kind of 2 questions. So was there any challenge to doing the gimmick? Or did you find that being a heel in that capacity kind of came easy?
I did. I mean, it's kind of like, when I was on the road, I mean, it's kind of like, it's like I didn't live the gimmick in terms of just, like everyday daily life. Like when I walked through an airport or something, and if somebody spotted me, obviously a lot of people recognize, celebrities when they walk. I mean, I've recognized celebrities walking through an airport. Oh God, that's what's his name? But I don't know him. I didn't walk up and approach any of them, but because it's kind of like, like me, and I appreciate fans, and I'll be honest with you, if fans approach me in the airport or wherever, a restaurant, as long as, for example, now if I'm sitting at a booth or something, and it's obvious that I'm having dinner, and I want my privacy, I don't appreciate people just walking right up to the table. But I've had people where I'd go in and I would have dinner, and I would walk out, and walking out, these fans were such big fans. They waited. They waited outside and paid me the courtesy of not interrupting me.
That's the right way.
And I said, what else you have to sign? I said, I mean, not, if you show me that kind of respect, you got 3 things, I'll sign it all. That was kind of like my attitude. But no, I had no. There wasn't much trouble being the $1 Million Man the way Vince wanted me to be. I mean, it's kind of like I stayed at really nice hotels, and the limousine service. Of course, the limousine service, what didn't continue to be limousine service. Then it when the limos were over, then he said, when you guys are rent like rent a big car, like a big 4-door car, and travel that way. But otherwise, and again, the money, of course, all those perks that started the character, like, when I am seen in public and, oh man, that guy, he was in that restaurant, and he picked up everybody's tab and all those, that was Vince wrote all that off as marketing the product. And of
Absolutely.
course, once the character was well established, then those things went away, and then I was like everybody else, doing
I
my
mean, pretty easy gimmick to sink your teeth into if you think about it. Like, hey, I'm gonna put you in this limousine, give you some flash cash, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I'm sure that the transition from loaded black glove MidSouth Ted to $1 million Ted
yeah,
is not
oh
not
yeah.
a tough one.
But I mean, and everybody goes, who else do you think could have been the $1 Million Man? I said Vince. I said I
There's
believe
the answer.
if Vince could be a character in his own program, that's who he would have been. And it only makes sense.
There's the answer. Is yep. That's it. It is Vince McMahon. I've heard the stories about him paying some guy $500 to put out a cigarette on an airplane at one point because he didn't want to smell it. It's like that's the $1 Million Man.
Yeah, yeah, yep, yep, yeah,
uh,
yeah. I know that story too, and that's right. That's what he did.
incredible,
Yeah,
incredible. A couple more,
and he
Ted.
did
Then
it, and he did it. He did it to prove. I mean, he did it to prove it to uh,
Bruce.
not Bruce. It was Pat Patterson. Everybody's got a price. That way. Let me show you. That's how he did it.
Just amazing, man. Next up, we've got Joe Ness, who asks, besides Doc, who was your best partner and best opponent in MidSouth?
In Mid-South, wow. Well, obviously, Steve Williams was my best partner, and I know that uh, the Cowboy put Doc with me because it's kind of like when you want to help somebody along, you know, same thing was done to me. I was put in matches with different people when I was young and just starting, but I was put in matches with those people so I could learn. And and Doc was unbelievable. I mean, here's a guy who in college was a two-sport athlete. You don't do that in college anymore. I mean, for the longest time, I was given a scholarship to play football at West Texas State. Well, I was a football player. That's it. Steve Williams played football for the University of Oklahoma, one of the top universities and football teams anywhere, and he also wrestled.
Man,
He was a two-sport athlete in college. It's just incredible.
just a
So
freak athlete.
I love but Doc picked up the business. He was good. And I'm trying to think of what it was that something happened. I can't remember where we were going. I think we were up in Oklahoma driving somewhere, and somebody did something. Somebody like cut us off or did something, and Doc, he just made him so mad. He went around. He actually went around them on the wrong side of the road, like on the yeah, on the
Yeah.
shoulder. Gets in front of them, and he says, "Put your seatbelt on," and he slams on brakes, and this car came up and just missed hitting us. It was like,
Whew,
and
man.
Doc gets out of the car and he's just cutting a promo on all these, and you can see the expression on everybody's face in that car. They're rolling up the windows, they're locking the doors and everything, and he's cutting a promo on them. And finally, he just goes with his hand, wham, and right in the middle of the hood, he hits the hood of the car and puts this gigantic dent in it.
Oh my.
And then we just get in our car and we pull away. And he looked over at me like a little kid and went, Kind of like, but anyway, those were some special moments. But yeah, I loved working with Doc. What was the question? I go back to the question.
Your favorite, and thank you for that story. It's incredible. Just
Yeah.
picturing Doc, because he had that huge hair and the big beard. He looks like a Sasquatch.
Yeah.
And just picturing that guy coming out and cutting a promo on you, man.
Yeah.
I'd be trying to speed off.
Yeah.
But the other question was, besides Doc, who'd you like teaming up with, and who's your best opponent in MidSouth?
Oh gosh. Besides Doc,
you teamed up with Duggan back during like the Rat Pack days, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say the Rat Pack. You know, Duggan for sure, and then I think wasn't there somebody under that mask? The Grappler.
Oh, Len Denton.
Len Denton. Len Denton, you know, doesn't get the credit that he deserves. I mean, he was great, man.
Yes.
And I remember I had gone to Japan. Now you have to understand, Japan. It's like it's a 3/4 shoot in Japan. In other words, it's a work, but they lay him in.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? You know, everything looks really real because it's a half shoot. And so I had just come back from Japan, and I have this match with him, and for whatever reason, I kept potatoing him, you know, just not intentionally. And so finally he rolled out. He rolled out on the floor, and he looked up at me and he said, "Hey, you're back in the USSA. Loosen up." It was all I could do to keep from just cracking up in the middle of the ring.
Man,
he was great though. He was really good.
I've heard nothing but good things about Len Denton.
Yeah.
Man, I know that he was out at WrestleCon recently out there in LA, and Jake said that he was happy to see him. He's still out there getting it done, man. I would love to get him on one of our shows one of these days.
Yeah, he's good. Back to that question. Who did I love working with? You know, I didn't more than anybody in MidSouth. You know, I got to be very close friends with Junkyard Dog.
Oh, nice.
I mean, enough so that JYD was the best man when my wife and I got married.
Really?
And, yes. And, you know, when we first met each other, we were both baby faces, and eventually, of course, I turned. You know, and you know, I had the most fun and the biggest run with JYD that you could ever imagine. Yeah. So, and like, I'm trying to think of. I mean, the first time I wrestled him after I turned on him. Oh my gosh! After I turned on him, the first time I wrestled him in New Orleans was just unbelievable.
Oh man!
It was kind of like, well, it's like I told everybody. I told the guys. I said, "Look, I'm not going to drive my car to New Orleans." So why? I said, because it'll be on blocks when I come out. You know, I mean, the wrestling fans took their wrestling really serious, and I had, I had just turned on my best friend basically. And so Grizzly Smith, Jake's dad, who was like the agent for Bill Watts, he says, "Okay," he says, "you just ride with me." So I rode with Grizzly Smith to New Orleans, and so me and JYD go out. We have the match, and of course, you know, this is like the first time, and I beat him again illegally somehow because we're going to have another rematch and come back and sell it out again, right? And so I go back and I shower and I come out and I'm getting dressed, and old Grizz comes walking in there, and he got his hands on his hips and just looking at me and shaking his head. I said, "What's wrong?" He just shaking his head. I said, "Something wrong with the match?" He says, "No, damn it, the match was great." I said, "Well, what's wrong?" He said, "They slit my tires, all 4 of them." I said, "See?" I said, "They just slit your tires." I said, "I wouldn't have had any tires on my car." That's a true story. Oh my gosh. So that took us a while to get out of New Orleans that night.
Man, it's to put into context what a star he was, he being Junkyard Dog in New Orleans,
Yeah.
like Elvis level popularity.
Oh, yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Like a
I mean,
massive,
in New
massive star.
Orleans, I don't think there's anybody, I don't care what they do, I don't think there's anybody more popular than the Junkyard Dog was. I mean, the New Orleans Saints, there wasn't a football player. There wasn't anybody more popular than JYD.
Man, it's such a great performer, and I can't wait to look back. I mean, look, somebody online said recently, like, "Hey, when are you going to cover more of? We're only covering WWF stuff on this podcast. When are you going to cover more?" It's like, buddy, we've got a long ways to go and a lot of story to tell. We're going to be talking about MidSouth, your rivalry with him. I can't wait to talk about the tuxedo match with Jim Duggan, Japan. I mean, buddy, we've got an awful lot to cover, and I can't wait to get into it. All right, Ted, last question, and then I'll let you go. And actually, I'm just coming up with this one on the fly because we brought up Matt Bourne. I've heard an awful lot about him over the years, maybe kind of a wild guy at times, a partier. Give me your best Matt Bourne story. I know you've got to have at least one.
Oh gosh, brother. Um, it's like my best Matt Bourne story is like him almost getting in a shoot fight with Hacksaw.
Was that was not all that long ago, right? Like 10 years ago or something? 12 years ago?
Well, I think it was a little longer than that, but I mean,
Was this in Mid-South? Did they got into a shoot
yeah,
fight? Oh, okay. Yeah, so
yeah.
they did it a few years ago, well, like 10, 12 years ago at like an indie event where it was like it turned into a shoot in the middle of the ring. I don't know if you've ever seen
Well,
that footage.
well, that's because that whole Matt, he was a good worker, but he had an attitude,
Mhm.
and Jim hated it, man. He just and they almost came to Fist City, in Mid-South, and so I'm sure whatever happened, how long ago?
I'm probably gonna get killed online for not knowing the exact year. It
Well,
may have been like 2009, 2010, somewhere
yeah,
in there.
but wherever that was a hangover.
Yeah.
Was a like and I get it. I mean, uh, I understood Jim's angst with Matt. Matt was a good worker, but just he just had an attitude about him that wasn't the best.
Yeah, it's rest in peace to Matt Bourne. I'm sure he's a lovely human being. I've never had the opportunity to meet him before
Yeah,
he passed, but yeah, I mean, from everything I've heard, like, man, the guy could be really volatile, kind of living life on the edge,
yeah,
and like,
yeah, yeah,
when you start doing that, you're messing with people's money.
yeah, yeah. And that's it. I mean, you couldn't have said it better. Like I said, great in the ring, great worker, but it's like it takes more than just being a great worker. You got to get along with everybody, and you know, there's got to be compromise sometimes, and he just it wasn't there.
Well, we'll tell more Matt Bourne stories down the road because we are going to do a Rat Pack episode. I want to get Jim Duggan on this podcast to do that. I've got all kinds of plans and ideas.
Well, you might have to do that because when we start talking like that, it's going to take Jim to help me remember some of these stories.
Man, just picturing hosting a podcast with the two of you telling stories. So I cannot wait. We're going to make it happen one of these days here. So, Ted, you ready to jump into some of these fan questions?
Let's go.
All right, here we go. David Ziegler asks, I just finished the Dark Side episode on JYD. It was by far my favorite in the entire series, though the payoffs were much less in Mid-South compared to the WWF. Where did you have a better time? Mid-South seems like it was a great time with great guys and many legends.
I had a great time in Mid-South. I mean, it's kind of like Mid-South was like right at the end of what we call the territory era. Territorially, I guess it more fun in terms of we all, it was kind of like a caravan. It's kind of like once I went to the WWF, I wasn't traveling by car anymore. We were flying everywhere.
Yeah.
And when you're driving, it was a lot different. Like, I can't remember Monday nights were back in MidSouth days, and it was a big territory, huge, but just like one of the circuits. Uh, a lot of guys lived in Baton Rouge, so we'd wrestle in New Orleans on Monday night. That's easy. That was like an 85-mile trip. We'd wrestle in Baton Rouge on Tuesday night, so that's almost like you're 2 nights sleeping in your bed at home in your apartment. And then so either Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, you would get up and drive, 240 miles to Shreveport for the sole reason of going to the TV studio and doing interviews for that week's TV show.
Mm.
And then after interviews are done, and that would be like from like about 8:30 or 9 o'clock till noon. Then you'd have lunch, get in your car, and you would drive 200 miles east to Jackson, Mississippi, and wrestle in Jackson Wednesday night. And a couple of ways. Either you stayed over in Jackson Wednesday because Thursday you were going to go north 100 miles or 120 miles, either to Greenwood or Greenville, Mississippi. Wrestle there now on Thursday night, and then from there drive all the way back to Baton Rouge. Now, it is from Jackson, because I live in a suburb of Jackson, Mississippi now. It's 180 miles from here to Baton Rouge.
My goodness.
So that's a 280 or maybe almost a 300-mile trip, depending on whether you were in Greenwood or Greenville, back to Baton Rouge on Thursday night. And then Friday, you would wrestle either in there were a few possibilities. One place was a little place called La Ranger. I mean, La Ranger is so small. It is but they would pack this little building, and it was like only it was like 30 minutes from Baton Rouge, and this little bitty town. Or you might go to Lafayette. Lafayette was, 30 or 40 minutes, I think, from Baton Rouge, and and wrestle there, and then you go back home. And then Saturday, depending on what week it was, once Bill Watts bought Houston, we would drive all the way to Houston, and wrestle in Houston on Saturday night, and drive back.
How long was that trip?
Oh my gosh, it was like 350 miles, I think.
My goodness.
The only time that we would fly is Bill Watts would fly us like from Baton Rouge on a Saturday. He'd fly us to Oklahoma City, and we would work a show at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And that would be over at 3. And then we would get in our rental cars, and drive 100 miles to Tulsa and do an evening show. And then get on a plane in Tulsa Monday, fly back to Baton Rouge, get in our cars, and drive to New Orleans. It was nuts. It's like, sometimes I think about that and I said, God, I can't believe I did that. And I mean, but then once we went to the WWF, and most of that was flying. But a lot of times what Vince would do is he would like fly us into, say, Chicago, and maybe, you work in Chicago on Friday night, and then Saturday you go about 100 miles north to Milwaukee, and then on Sunday you go another, I don't know how far it is from Milwaukee to Green Bay. Work in Green Bay on Sunday night, and then Sunday night drive all the way back, stay over in Chicago, and then catch a flight out Monday morning. But still, it's travel. I mean, travel, but not all of it was by car. And and again, because of the traveling by car most of the time, the camaraderie and I don't know, it's just, I guess it was like a little less stressful than flying and having to be sure you don't miss your flight, and you got to get your rental car, and you got to do this, you got to do that. When we were just driving, you just got your car and you went. But at the end of the territory days, I hated to see him go.
Man, hearing all the stories about the territories, and gosh, there's a lot out there now in this podcasting era. Man, it sounds it sounds crazy. Don't get me wrong. It's like the inmates were just out
Yeah.
running loose across across the country. But the fun you guys must have had, stories, drinking, like probably a great time when you're in your 20s.
Oh gosh, and I was yeah.
Well, hey, look, we've got another kind of sort of dark side related question here that I'd love to hear your take on. Adam Holland asks, my question for you, Ted, is any memories of Matt Osborne while you were running the Rat Pack in Mid-South Wrestling? First of all, Ted, did you see the
Matt.
Dark Side of the Ring on Matt?
Do what?
Did you watch the episode of Dark Side of the Ring about Matt Bourne?
Matt Bourne? No, I did not.
Oh, okay, man, it was a tough watch.
Well, and you know what? I personally never had any problem with Matt, but someone who I love dearly, who is one of the greatest guys in the world, and one of the toughest SOBs in the world, is Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Duggan and Matt Bourne. I thought they were going to tear the dressing room up one night, and that was a relationship that was never good. Matt was he's just a weird guy, just a different guy.
Man, what a hell of a performer! As I was watching that, I was like, man, like this guy seems pretty unhinged. However, watching his ring work, it's like, man, that dude could go.
Yeah, he could go, but he was not exactly Mr. Personality.
Next up, we've got Yambag Jones, who asks, who's your favorite wheelman and who did you know never to get in the damn car with?
My favorite wheelman was me.
And
I guess I was pretty notorious for having a real heavy foot. My wife even told me, she said, honey, she says, a lot of your buddies, they may not tell you, but, you scared the shit out of a lot of them by the way you drove. I said, really? Well, but I don't know. Some guys might say, don't ever get in the ring with Ted. I mean, in a car with Ted. But the other thing is wasn't. And then traditionally wrestlers bought great big 4-door cars because you're going to be riding with somebody. And then I just got a wild hair and I bought a Trans Am. This is a Trans Am that looked just like the Trans Am in Smokey and the Bandit.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, with the T-tops, the whole deal. And you talk about, oh my gosh, I broke a lot of records. It's like, we actually had to wrestle, on Christmas night.
Yeah.
When the promoters found out that people actually would go out to events, it's like, I guess you unwrap all your presents and you want to go do something. So Christmas night became a big money night, and it was New Orleans. And I wrestled in New Orleans. I remember a Christmas morning, I got up and I drove down there and I wrestled, and it's 180 miles, I think, back from Baton Rouge. From New Orleans back to Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it in 2 hours and 10 minutes.
I take it the police didn't try to stop you?
Brother, it was Christmas night. There wasn't anybody on that highway. I put the eagle of my Trans Am, I put that eagle head right on the white line. I was just, every now and then I would pass a car, but other than that, it was just, giddy up, go.
Man, that is some Smokey and the Bandit stuff.
Yeah, it is. But, anyway, it was, again, Anybody that has ever thought that wrestling was an easy life is just, they don't know what the hell we're talking about.
Man, it's I can't imagine how difficult that would be because you're with your own children and you've got to say, okay, yeah, that was fun, that was great. We all open our presents. See you guys later. And you just leave. It's man, that would be tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next up, we've got Eddie Prather who asks, Ted, where would you rank Brad Armstrong as an in-ring worker? He's easily in my top 5.
And I would agree. And, you know, I also, I had a lot to do with a young Brad Armstrong. Because when he first came to Atlanta, he and I, you know, we worked a lot together. And, you know, I think even Brad would have told you that I helped him mature a lot as a worker. But oh my gosh, I mean, again, he's a guy like myself who grew up idolizing his dad and wanted to do nothing else but be a wrestler. And he, yeah, gosh, I mean, he was really good. I mean, yeah, would I put him in the top 5? Absolutely, without a doubt.
You know, I talked to Jake recently on our podcast, The Snake Pit, about Brad Armstrong, and Jake said that I asked him why he thought Brad Armstrong didn't reach greater heights in wrestling, and he said because Brad wasn't really willing to travel. Like if Vince would have got his hands on him, would have been a whole other ball of wax. But he said Brad just wanted to stay in the South and be close to his family. Was that your impression as well?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
Man,
yeah, you can't blame him for that. So
no. I mean, look, if you're making a good living and you don't have to travel too far from home, why would you mess with that?
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we've got Christopher who asks, Ted, you were there for the Goldberg phenomenon. What did you think of Goldberg and his quick rise?
Well, I mean, I can't blame Goldberg for anything. I mean, it's like. It was just, you know, he was at the right place at the right time, and it was a great opportunity. But you're talking about a guy that they pushed from the get-go that had no earthly knowledge about what the hell he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, he was just such a novice in terms of being a wrestler, and it wasn't his fault. I mean, and he, you know, being the right guy with the right look at the right time at the right place, you know, that's how I look at that whole thing. Personally, I think he's a great guy, you know, but you know, I have never considered him like, you know, I wouldn't put him in the top 5, maybe not even the top 10 of like performers. He was just, again, he came, you know, out of football, and that was his. You know, that was his way in, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I just was never that impressed with his wrestling ability.
No, I mean it was kind of like a train wreck where he's coming out there, and I, you know, as a kid, I'm watching him, and I'm like, hey, I like this guy because it looks like he's just beating the shit out of everybody he gets in the ring with. As it turns out, he was like apparently those spears and kicks could be pretty stiff.
Yeah.
RCS 88 asks, if you formed the Rat Pack in the WWF in 87 to 88, which 2 guys on the roster at the time would have been a good fit? I mean, Jim Duggan was there.
In the WWF?
Yeah.
No, the Rat Pack never made it to the WWF. That was me and Hacksaw and
Bourne.
Yeah.
Well, so his question is, if you had formed it in the WWF, what 2 guys on that roster would you have liked to have paired up with? Hypotheticals.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. I don't know. Who else was there with me? I mean, what were the other heels with me?
I mean, Jim was there. In theory, if you wanted to form the Rat Pack, I guess you could turn Jim Duggan heel. And I'm trying to think of who else stood out in that era. I don't know. Hey, look, maybe the move is you take a team like the Brainbusters, Arn and Tully, because they were there in '88, and there's your Rat Pack. That could work.
That could work. Or, you know, if I, you know, again, Hacksaw would have been great, you know, and Jake.
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
could you imagine?
Heel, you know.
All right, I like your idea better than mine. Jimmy asks, Ted, what can you tell us about your relationship and working with Scott Hall?
I didn't work a lot with Scott Hall. It's like, when he first started, when when that whole thing got going, and I had a match with him, put him over, um, and that whole deal with Scott and
Kevin.
Kevin, and I think it was Shawn Michaels.
Oh, the Click, yes.
Click. I was, I just tried to stay away from that as far as I could, and I did, it was kind of like it'll either implode or explode, and I didn't know which was going to happen, but obviously, it didn't implode. It got over. So, but that was their first real taste of main event for both of them, for Scott and for Kevin.
All right, next up we've got Bob Weirton, who asks, did you have any kind of relationship with Ray Traylor? Brother Love Show with you, Boss Man, Slick, and Jake is one of my earliest memories watching wrestling, and I have been a mark for the Boss Man ever since. I know that you worked with him alongside the Steiner brothers in WCW too. What do you think of Ray?
Ray was a good guy. He was a real good guy. He was a funny guy, a very likable guy, and I never had a problem with Ray. And he was dang good worker. He played his part well.
Man, a guy his size being able to move the way that he could.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty impressive guy. Here's a not wrestling related question. It's kind of an interesting one. Sean Berkey asks, what is your favorite movie?
Oh, wow.
You don't get asked this one in shoot interviews, gosh, I bet, right?
Man, I'm a real movie buff. I mean, one of my favorite things to do is go to the movies. I mean, I have spent my whole life getting in front of people and entertaining them. So going to the movies is my opportunity to go be entertained. Oh my gosh, it would be. I'm a typical guy. I like the war movies, man. One of those movies that comes to mind is Flags of Our Fathers.
Oh yeah,
was a good, and I think it was based on, some facts. I mean, I think that's one. Wasn't that the one where they were on Iwo Jima?
I believe so. It's been a while since I watched it.
And it was just that was a real intense movie. And again, I like good old westerns. I mean, remember I went to high school in this little town called Wilcox. That's, as a crow flies, about 65 miles from Tombstone, Arizona. So Tombstone, the movie, was a big hit with me, and just the one Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner, because those characters are, that was, it's a part of history that, and a matter of fact, I can't remember which one, but in the old, there's two cemeteries in Wilcox now. There's the old cemetery, and for years, I mean, they just let weeds grow up and everything. It's almost like they forgot about it. But then they went back and they cleaned it all up and everything, and you could go walk through there now. My father and my mother, my grandmother, they're buried at the newer cemetery in Wilcox. But in the old cemetery, one of the Earp brothers is buried there. He got into a fight with somebody in the bar right there. It was called Railroad Avenue, obviously, because the railroad came right through there, and went out on the street and got shot, killed. So one of the Earps is buried in the old Wilcox cemetery.
How about that?
Yeah. But so I like, I like the westerns, man.
Well, if you had to choose Clint Eastwood or John Wayne, who's your guy?
Oh, wow. That's tough.
Right?
That's really tough. Okay, I'm going to put it this way. For their representative eras, obviously, there is no match for John Wayne in his era. And for Clint Eastwood, I don't think there was any much for his era of it's kind of like, like what era did I wrestle in? That type of deal. It's kind of like
Yes.
if I were to start talking about Dory Funk Sr. and Iron Mike DiBiase, that was their era. That was the era right before me. I mean, that's a toss up, man. I mean, both those guys, in my estimation. And John Wayne did a lot of westerns, but he also played other parts and was good in all of them.
Same thing with Clint Eastwood. He kind of branched out and started to do some serious stuff and directing, and yeah, it's that's a tough one for me too.
Yeah.
Because man, John, like I love that movie Rio Bravo with John Wayne, and
Yeah.
Dean Martin, and those guys back in the
Yeah.
day. But some of the stuff that Clint Eastwood has done, even modern, is man unbelievable.
Another one of my an all-time favorite movie, The Alamo.
Oh yeah,
The Alamo with John Wayne, and oh gosh, a litany of stars were in that movie.
man, says you got me. You're giving me the itch to go and watch some old westerns now. All right, next up we have got Darth Vengeance, who asks, who would you love to work with today? Ted, any modern day wrestlers stand out to you?
I've got to be real honest. I am not a big fan of the modern era of wrestling, and I'm just the guy Roman Reigns. I mean, there's I guess probably one of their biggest stars now, right?
Yeah.
Or is Roman Reigns the guy? I mean, is he not like would he be Hulk Hogan of modern day?
For sure. And by the way, a lot of people point to the angle with you and Hogan and the twin referees. A lot of people for many years have said like, well, that's the greatest story ever told in professional wrestling. Now a lot of people are starting to come around on Roman Reigns and his story with the bloodline. I don't know if you've seen any of that, but like a lot of people are saying like, well, this might be the greatest story ever told in wrestling. So hard to beat Roman Reigns.
Yeah. And again, Roman Reigns is, and who was Roman's father?
Sika.
Yeah.
Or was it Alpha?
Well, it's one of them.
Yes.
yeah. I can't remember, but Alpha and Sika, man. And again, you have another second generation wrestler who, grew up wanting to be like his daddy. And there's a lot of us.
Man, it's the first name that came to mind whenever I read that question initially. I was like, man, Ted in his prime with maybe Cody Rhodes, that could be something.
Yeah.
So there's certainly no end of the talent out there. Come on, Bryan Danielson, could put on a hell of a match. All right. Next up, here's a related question. We've got Jonathan Robson. Was there anyone from your 80s and 90s WWF run that you never got to work with, but you wish you could have?
Wow.
I'm kind of racking my brain on it. I mean,
gosh.
Like a program with you and Shawn Michaels, maybe? I don't know.
Well, okay. That would be one. Because I didn't ever get to work with him there, but I did work with Shawn in MidSouth when he first started. The first time he showed up in the dressing room for Bill Watts, I was there, and I did a TV match with him, and I could tell he had the stuff, buddy.
Even as a young guy, he wasn't green, or didn't come off as green.
No, he, for as young as he was, again, it's kind of like you can tell, you can tell, you can't, you can't, the one innate thing that you can't give anybody is charisma. And if you don't have charisma, you're never going to be a successful wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of guys like, for example, I mean, not only was Shawn full of charisma, but he was an excellent worker.
Our next question is from Brent Lindsay. He asks, with all the talents having problems with pain relievers and alcohol abuse problems due to injuries, my question is, how did you deal with the day-to-day pain problems without abusing substances?
Well, I mean, you gotta be careful. That's all I can say. Um, the you know, I took like I took pills that would what do they I don't know what do you call them? I mean, like a that would keep me up. I
Okay.
did
Like
I did
Adderall or Speed or
well,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, something like that, like Adderall. Adderall's a good one because I mean, and Adderall comes in different doses and stuff, and so um, that's what I basically would do. Were there some times when I snorted a line of coke or something? Yeah, it's like I can remember stopping dog on the highway one night because I was almost asleep at the wheel, and I had to get to Shreveport. And I said, "Well, he's going." I kind of gave him the lights and had him stop on the side of the road. And I was looking for maybe a Benny or something like that, and he says, "No, this is what I've got." And so we like two, and
You're ready to
down
roll.
it's all I needed to get me there. So, but again, I was not like a, I was not like a, it wasn't like an everyday thing for me. Uh, any of that stuff. And I couldn't stand pot. I mean, I think the first time I ever smoked pot, it was kind of like some guys could smoke pot, and it was like they took an upper. It's like they're like this.
Mm-hmm.
Not me. I'm like this. I'm really hungry, and could somebody please help me get out of this chair? So me and marijuana did not mix at all. If now I have, and like, like today, like you can get gummies. That I mean, it's pot.
Yes.
But and what I do is I'll take half of one of those, and it helps me go to sleep, stay asleep. It's not relaxium. It's better.
I've heard about a lot of people that use gummies for whether it's
Yeah,
sleep issues or anxiety. Like,
yeah,
man, it's
yeah,
a lot of people still say like, oh well, it's a drug. It's kind of medicine if you're not
yeah,
using it for
yeah.
recreation.
And I never, like, I mean, and again, I traveled with JYD a lot. JYD, I mean, a JYD dog could smoke a joint, and it was like it lit him up. I'm telling you, it had that effect on him. Where I would have been over here like this, he's wide eyed. And so you know, and he just got into it to, way into it too much. Sad story.
That is, I mean, watching that, it was tough. If you missed the Dark Side of the Ring with JYD, which aired last night as we're recording this, go out of your way to go and find the replay of it because man, it's a tough story, and certainly heartbreaking at the end, but really it's a lot of it's a celebration of him and his incredible career.
Yeah, yeah.
Next up, Ted, we've got Brian Deere. How did you come up with your finisher, the $1 million dream? Ted, you were doing the fist drop when you first got there for a while, right?
Well, the fist drop was never a finish, really, and so it's kind of like it was something I used, and it's something that was unique to me because not too many people did that. And after a while, I had to modify it because what I would do is I would kick out and I would come down and I would have my left arm in tight, and I'm coming down with the fist like this. And
Yeah.
as long as I held that right there, like in the middle of my chest, even though it looked like it, I like took his head off, it just barely touched it. And so, yeah, a lot of people liked the fist drop, but it wasn't a finisher for me. And it's kind of like you have to come up with a finish that you can do on anybody,
Mm.
you know. And so there were some things, it's like, I could, like, I don't know, I think somebody did a power slam as a finish. And it's like, well, I could do a power slam with a lot of guys, but, you put me in there with a, 350-pound guy, I ain't going to be able to power slam him. Right. And so what I called the $1 million dream was a modified sleeper hold.
And it's smart business too,
yeah,
because really it reduces the wear and tear on your body. If you're hoisting a dude up for a finish every single night,
yeah,
man, that'll beat you up.
yeah. So yeah, I just called it the $1 million dream, and it was just a modified sleeper hold, and that's why that's something that I could put on anybody. So
I've heard Hogan say over the years that his biggest regret is that he didn't just use a sleeper hold as his finish, because he's like, I had the largest arms in the world, so to speak, and I should have just used a sleeper instead of dropping on my ass every night, which screwed up his back.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Ted, we'll do a couple more and then we'll get out of here. Aaron Liebman asks, did you consider going back to the WWF after it became apparent WCW had no plans for you in 1998?
Well, no, actually, by that time, again, my whole move to WCW was a move. I mean, because my initial contract with them was a 3-year guaranteed deal, and I got each year got more, and it was no cut, and whether they used me or they didn't use me. So I think when I first got there, I don't think, I mean, again, like who was running it? Eric Bischoff. And I like Eric. Eric's a nice guy, but I'll be honest with you, at that time, Eric didn't know squat about wrestling. He was learning. I mean, how he got put in that position, I still don't understand. But if you take the ball, try to run with it.
It was around 1998, and I think, and I don't know this for sure, but I think it was like right around the time that Scott Steiner turned heel and joined the NWO that like we just kind of stopped seeing you on TV, because you had been managing the Steiner brothers, and it's like at that time, as you're not being used, were you like, hey, maybe I could go back at some point?
Well, I mean, again, and the Steiners were baby faces.
Yeah.
And that was the deal, and when I first came in there, I was a heel. And so it's almost like, they turned me babyface, and put me with the Steiners. And I guess that's because they really didn't have anything else to do with me. And I just told Eric, I said, look, I said, if you're not going to do anything else with me, then you might as well just leave me home. Because I knew whether they left me home or not, I was going to get paid. And that was it. And by that time, the other thing that was ramping up, and I told, that was the other deal. The other reason I think that they turned me babyface is I told them, I said, look, I have a ministry now, and I'm making a lot of appearances on Christian television. And so you might think about doing something to turn me babyface, because as far as because for the fans, it kills the whole thing. They see me on a religious program, talking about Jesus Christ, and then I'm this heel manager on TV. It's kind of like it kills it. I mean, that's
right.
Kills the whole mystique, right?
Yes.
And so that's why they turned to me babyface. But that part of my life was becoming much more important. So, I just looked at that as, okay, I'll take the 3 years, and then, because I wasn't going to work a lot for them, it gave me a lot more opportunity to book events, with churches, and that's what I did.
All right, Ted, last question, then I'll let you go. TJ Sherwood asks, who was your toughest opponent in the ring as far as actual work with them physically? So I think that TJ is asking, like, who maybe did you struggle to bring the best out of in the ring?
Oh, gosh.
I know the Warrior's probably an obvious answer just because he didn't know what the hell he was doing out there, but
Well, I mean, and that's what I was about to say, because unless you totally let him, and uh, I guess he would have been the hardest. Um,
what about like a big guy that, like ordinarily the big guys that kind of just lumber around, it's hard to, maneuver them.
well, with big guys, it's kind of like go back to what Terry Funk told me. He says, you got to put them in the middle of the ring and work around them. And so
Uh,
the great big guys, what I would do in the matches with those guys, like like oh my gosh,
Bundy or
yeah,
Andre.
Bundy. Not I didn't work. Andre was always my partner. Who's another real big guy? Shoot,
Did you ever work with like Haystacks or one of those guys?
no, but there was Bundy, and there was anyway. But pretty much, I would like lock up with those guys, and then I would have them just power out. They would just push me off, right? And like, and even go back into the corner with it, and kind of scratch my head, and make it look to the people. And it's like, like I'm thinking about what do I got to do to this guy, and then I keep locking up with him, and he just keep powering out, and I'd hit him, and like hit him like, and I was gonna, turnbuckle him, and he wasn't going anyway. And I would tell him, don't move, don't move. It's like I couldn't turnbuckle him, and I'd have him reverse it, and he'd turnbuckle me. But at some point, I would do something to where maybe have him, go for a clothesline, and I duck and go behind him, and I would clip him at the knee from behind, and and so now I'm getting him down on his knees to where we're face to face,
Yes,
and I can start working on his head. So if that makes any sense,
it does.
that's the type of things I would do that would logically, if you're working with somebody that big, that's you got to work on them when and how you get them down. And so
Interesting. And something that I think is kind of a lost art. I mean, nowadays you see the big guys, and some of them are doing like moonsaults and stuff. It's like, man, I don't know if that's how you do it.
yeah, I don't know either, man.
Well, real quick, it's also making me wonder. Jake talks all the time about like how rough it was getting in the ring with Ronnie Garvin, where like he's like, "Hey, look, I love to work with the guy, but like you were limping away from the ring because it was half a shoot." Was there anybody like that you stepped into the ring with where it was like, man, I'm gonna get my ass beat tonight?
No, I worked with Ronnie Garvin a lot. I mean, Ronnie was, it's what we call stiff. I mean, if you ever went to Japan, I mean, all the Japanese were 3/4 stiff. I mean, it was like, the chop was the chop, and it was loud, it was real, and it would leave a big red handprint on your chest. Uh, but I mean, no, I never. That's I didn't, I didn't think that. I mean, Jake never had a problem with Ronnie, did he?
Oh no, he loves Ronnie Garvin and
Yeah.
they love their matches, but he always just says like, man, I would leave that ring covered in blood. Like it was like, and like he said, like it was essentially just devolved to live rounds while they were in the ring, just because it's like, okay, let's just, hey, look, if we're gonna make it look real, let's go ahead and make it look real.
Well, yeah, and see again, I was the same way, and it's yeah, like I was going to make it. It's kind of like my attitude was always, some of these people, they all think they're smart, wrestling's fake, and I'm going to do the best job I can for them. They might think every other match on this card was fake, but I'm going to try to make them believe mine was for real. Kind of like, hey, these two guys were going for it. So that was just the attitude in my head. So make it as real as you can. As a going away, one more Ronnie Garvin story.
Oh
Now,
my gosh, please.
Ronnie Garvin was a great worker, but also he was a pilot. He had a plane,
Yes.
and I think it was Alexandria, where we had wrestled, and I can't even now remember where we were going to go. But there was a couple of guys, and he said, "Hey, you know what? Hey, just ride with me and I in my plane." He said, "We'll be there in 30 minutes." And I said, "Oh, okay, great." And so this guy, and this is the promoter of the town in Alexandria, he drives us out to this field. I mean, when I say field, it's like a field. It's kind of like, where's the runway? And so we go out there. I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere, and it's like, and he said, so what he told him, he told the promoter, he says drive all the way down there to the end, and turn your car around, like facing the plane with your headlights on. That gives me something to see. In other words, as long as I can, I'm gonna take off coming right towards your car.
Oh my God.
I was like, I said, I'm thinking to myself, I hope I didn't make a mistake here. I don't want to. What was it? I don't want to be the next Buddy Holly story.
Right. It's, man. So you were on the plane while Ron Garvin is flying.
Oh yeah. I mean, and he well, we took right off, and I can't remember where we went, but I mean, you talk about a guy who was praying. I was like, oh my gosh.
Man,
that was wild.
That's you got to trust your body with these guys in the ring, but I don't know about trusting my body with one of the guys in the air.
But no, Ronnie was always. I mean, you talk about a great worker. Ronnie Garvin was one of the best.
Man, I'm starting to get introduced to him as I get older and kind of get into the podcasting thing where I'm doing my research, and I go back and watch a lot of his stuff. And man, he was awesome.
Yeah, very much so.
Everybody's got a pod, everybody's